especially as all of us who are committed to taking action for economic justice. So the number one lesson is we learned who is getting evicted. We see essentially three categories of people in eviction court. It's not a whole lot of different variations. The first category, I'll use our real clients situations. Those of you who've had the chance to see the book know that's the structure of the book. We have a rich vein of experiences, unfortunately, of people who struggle. And we see them every week. We see them sometimes by the dozens every week. So I won't use their real names, but I'll use a real situation. So the first category, I think, is embodied by a recent client. Her name's Adrienne. Adrienne is a fast food restaurant assistant manager. She's been promoted a couple of times. She's assistant manager now. She has 3 kids, but her car broke down. And like a lot of our clients, frankly, most of our clients, we're in a city that doesn't have great public transportation. And to get to work, to get to daycare, et cetera, folks need a car. Couldn't afford her typical car loan. So she has an as-is car with a really rapacious car loan with huge interests, and the car broke down. And because it's as-is, she still owed money on the car, and she still needed the car. So she had to use her rent money to fix the car. Use your rent money to fix the car, you end up in eviction court. We see this pretty commonly. So she represents the first category, which is parents with young children. We see folks, they are mostly young moms, not all young moms, but mostly young moms, mostly of persons of color. They're struggling earlier in their careers. I mean, just the demographics show, the data show that folks early in their careers don't make as much money. And sometimes they don't have as good a jobs as they might. And our clients usually make it work until something happens, like a car breaks down or some kind of childcare issues happen, and then they fall behind on their rent. So that's category number one of the folks we see in eviction court. The second category is embodied by a client we have recently named Yvonne. Yvonne got hurt at a warehouse job, and she's been treated at that job as an independent contractor, which means in the law that she isn't entitled to workers' compensation. And so she simply is out of work. Out of work means she can't pay her rent. She ends up in eviction court on the verge of being homeless. Our clients really, the working clients, which most of them are working, they work in warehouses where the average pay in our community is about $17 an hour. They work in food service where the average pay is about $15 an hour, or a lot of them work in home health care. You probably have intersected in your lives and your family's lives with people working in home health care. You know, incredibly important work that is in our economy and in our communities and our families. But it pays horrible. They get paid about $17 an hour. Their hours are very unpredictable. They don't usually have benefits. And what happens is what happened with Yvonne. Somebody gets sick, somebody gets hurt, a family member they care for gets sick or hurt. They miss a paycheck, or they are behind on the paycheck. And then what happens is this cliche that we've probably all heard many times before, is that half of us in this country, we're one paycheck away from being homeless. And in eviction court, you realize that cliche is true, because we see all the time folks who have been working, have been making it, stretching to make ends meet, and they come up a little bit short because of some event that happened, and their paycheck is sometimes not even missed totally, just lower than it usually is, and they can't pay the rent. So that's the second category of people. And the third category of folks we see, is the final category, is embodied by a recent client we had named Thomas. Thomas is in his 70s. Thomas is in a wheelchair. He's got various pretty serious health conditions. And that third category is people who are living with disabilities and or folks who are among the elderly. And that means they have a fixed income. You may know that some folks who have not put enough into the system to get Social Security fully, but they're disabled, they get supplemental security income known as SSI. SSI, the maximum amount for somebody like Thomas, $967 a month. In many instances, we've had clients who are on SSI, their rent is more than their check. And somehow, by begging, borrowing, doing extra stuff so they can they somehow make it work until, again, just like the young parents, they can't. In Thomas's case, he had a medication that wasn't covered that needed to be paid for. He didn't really have a choice. He paid that, but then that meant that he couldn't pay the rent, fell behind on the rent. We also see folks who are barely making it through by paying 80, 90% of their income on rent and then their landlords are ready to gentrify the neighborhoods. They're living, in senior housing or something like that, and the landlords want a different kind of demographic. So they say, hey, your lease is up, and we don't really want you around anymore. But if you want to stay, fine, we're going to raise your rent by 40%. And of course, they can't afford that. So those are the three categories of people that we see. But big picture, we see hundreds of them a week in our town of Indianapolis alone. But big picture across the nation, the data are this. There are this is Census Bureau data, 22.5 million people right now in the United States who are living in households that right now today, on this Saturday, are behind on their rent. 22.5 million is the equivalent of the population of the entire state of Pennsylvania and Illinois combined. Those are people who are right on the edge of joining us in eviction court, and many unfortunately do. There's 3.5 million new eviction cases filed each year. And there's different, again, they have the different categories, but they do all share key characteristics. One is that they can't afford market rate housing at this time. It could be a cheap landlord, it could be a bad landlord, it's a low cost landlord for most of the folks, but they simply can't afford market rate housing. And the second category is that they qualify for subsidized housing, but they can't get that either. Because what we do in the United States is for subsidized housing, we play this really cruel musical chairs game. Is that 3 out of every 4 households who are eligible for subsidized housing do not get it. Only 1 of every 4 households eligible for a federal housing subsidy. It can be a voucher, it can be public housing. They're the only ones who get it. And so those are the folks we see in eviction court. Almost every single person we've ever represented qualifies for federal and subsidized housing, which if you've ever seen it before, it essentially caps your rent at 30% of your income. So if you're like Thomas and you've got a $900 and some income every month, your rent's only $300 and some every month, and the federal government pays the rest, either through voucher housing with private landlords or through public housing. That would be the total game changer. But again, 3 out of every 4 people eligible for it don't get it. So that's kind of lesson number 1. That's who is getting evicted. Lesson number 2 is that we learn what the solutions are. And the first solution is pretty obvious. Let's end this musical chairs game, right? We can have universal housing assistance. And if that sounds crazy, think about the fact that if folks are eligible for food stamps, what's called SNAP now, it's called entitlement, and you get it. It's universally available if you are financially eligible for for food assistance. Same thing goes for health assistance. If you are financially eligible for Medicaid, then you are going to receive Medicaid. Now, of course, this Trump administration and others are trying to make it harder with work requirements and limits, et cetera. But it is currently and has been for decades an entitlement. And so we make it available. In fact, ironically, in one of the eviction courts where we work, pretty commonly, we will walk out of the courtroom, and in the government hallway outside of the courtroom, there is somebody set up a table with some colorful signs encouraging people to sign up for Medicaid. Every state sometimes names their Medicaid different ways. We call it Hoosier Healthwise in Indiana. But because they realize these are poor people, they're all eligible for Medicaid, they're all eligible for food stamps, they will get it if they just sign up. But for housing assistance, that's not true. And that's why they're literally walking out of a room where they just lost their home. And they're getting ready to figure out if they got to go to a shelter or the street or sleep in their cars, et cetera. So we can make housing assistance universal. It's done in other nations. We practically had it be universal in the United States in the mid 20th century and mid to late 20th century. It's not been a crazy political idea. The Biden president campaign proposed it the first time. There's been congressional legislation, so we can make universal housing assistance happen. In order to do that, really, I think we have to embrace public housing. I don't know in your communities what your experience with public housing has been. Unfortunately, in our community, like many, it's been very poorly maintained. It's been very poorly managed. But frankly, it's been starved of resources. They don't have enough money to keep the properties maintained. They don't have enough money to keep the properties safe. And so we have a situation where public housing in the United States, quite rightly, has a really bad name, but it can be really good. It used to be good in the United States. It's amazing in other places. It's amazing in places like Singapore. It's amazing in most places in Western Europe. I've had the chance to go to Vienna. In Vienna, 60% of the people in that community and that's in that city live in public housing. People of all kinds of incomes. People live in the same unit or big, spacious, beautiful apartments for multiple generations. Because why would you not want to live in this amazing neighborhood and amazing city where your prices are controlled and you can live in a safe and beautiful place? So public housing can be good. Public housing can be great, and we can do that in the United States. So those are kind of the big picture solutions. The more local solutions, and this is something that in your own community, I'll invite you to consider being involved in, is that the eviction courts are busy throughout this country. In our state of Indiana, we have really, really high eviction rates, but it's probably true in your community as well. Evictions are a real stain on the judicial system, where almost no one who's a tenant facing eviction has a attorney. The cases are set very quickly, and essentially people are run out of their homes very quickly. What has happened, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about it, is that advocates who are not attorneys, who have gone to court and created court watcher programs in our community and many others across the nation, have really made big changes and have made judges pay better attention, make judges treat people with more respect, and actually change the law in many respects. So we can do things like rent control. We can do things like good cause only eviction, so that leases should be renewed. We can do things like allowing folks, if they're living in unsafe conditions or unhealthy conditions the landlord won't fix, we can let them put aside their rent into escrow and make sure the conditions are fixed. So those are the solutions. So that's the second thing. First is who's getting evicted. Second is we learn what the solutions are. And the third is we have learned, I think, how to make those solutions happen. It used to be a shorthand that I would say in class and in the community and other places is, how do we fix our housing prices? Well, we need to have more housing subsidies. And then I realized one day looking around eviction court, that's not true. We have plenty of housing subsidies. We're just subsidizing the wrong people. If you look at eviction court, the vast majority of landlords who are evicting people are corporate landlords. They're huge private equity owned entities. They're not from our community. They're shadowy, multi-level organizations. But they turn out that one thing they share in common is they get enormous tax breaks. There's pass-through deductions. There's capital gains tax deferments. There's depreciation on the property, estate tax exemptions, etc. When you talk about a landlord making billions of dollars on the back of government breaks, there's a really easy one to use an example that's in the White House right now, right? But I won't use that one because that can be politically polarizing. But we use the example of a guy named Stephen Ross. Stephen Ross is one of the 150 richest people in the world. He's so rich he owns an NFL team, the Miami Dolphins. He is a landlord. He used to be a real estate tax lawyer, and so he knew how the game was played. And he built up a fortune to the point where he raked in $1.5 billion. There's a ProPublica article out there if you ever want to Google Stephen Ross. $1.5 billion in revenue over the course of 10 years. And he paid zero in taxes. Zero. There are so many breaks that we give, so many subsidies that we give to big corporate landlords. And frankly, if you look around the courtroom and actually just look at the folks like me, the lawyers in the courtroom or the judges in the courtroom, or maybe many of us on this call, if we own our own homes, we live in government subsidized housing because mortgages have been in the United States enormously subsidized. Mortgage interest deductions. We can sell the home and not have to pay capital gains taxes. The 30-year fixed rate mortgage, which allows me and the lawyers and the judges in the courtroom to know where we're going to live next year and the year after that, and we know what we pay. That's a blessing that our clients who are renters don't have. They don't know where they're going to live next year. They don't know if their lease is going to renew. They don't know what they're going to pay, but they probably know it's going to go up. And those of us with mortgages with fixed rates know that we're going to pay a certain amount. So those are all federally mandated benefits to homeowners. So if you put that together and look, in the courtroom, the judges and the lawyers are getting subsidies, not as much as the corporate landlords. We're getting some. The ones who aren't getting subsidies are people getting evicted. So the government subsidized housing, the easy answer isn't we don't have to go find a whole bunch of housing money to make sure that our clients who are single moms who are living with disabilities have safe and stable housing. We just need to take some of the subsidies from the people who need it the least and provide it to the people who need it the most. We just need to shift that money around, not even find the new run. That housing is what we call is you've all heard the very famous and very apt Dr. King quote, different than the one Terry gave us to start. And that is that in the United States, we too often have socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the poor. And you go to eviction court, you see that happening. You see that happen every single day in every court around the country. So we can fix this by shifting the subsidies. We also can get on that path by taking our own individual action. It's a privilege for me to be able to do this work and introduce students to the issues and to help people facing eviction. But I'm not doing that, and the students aren't doing that alone anymore. We have folks from congregations, including our All Souls Unitarian congregation here in Indianapolis, but a lot of folks from Methodist congregation, from the Indianapolis Hebrew congregation, etc. And they have created a court watching program. And they go around to the eviction court and they sit there. Sometimes they're collecting data. But to be honest, it's not the data collection that's the most valuable contribution. It's the witness, right? There's real power in witness. There's real power in proximity. And they are seeing, unfortunately, the eviction courts are the emergency rooms of our housing crisis. And then frankly, the emergency rooms of our poverty crisis. Housing is the biggest expense for every family, especially low-income families. And so they're gone, and they started to create collect some data. But more importantly, then they start meeting with the judges after. Then they start meeting with legislators after. Then they start coming together as a multi-faith, interfaith group to advocate at our state legislature. We have had, and Indiana is a very, very, very red state. But we have successfully resisted some of those horrible anti-camping ordinances, which are trying to, criminalize homelessness, in significant part because people from congregations have gone to eviction court and seen the gateway to homelessness, have gone and talked to legislators. So that's actually a way that our congregation has been involved in other congregations around our community. And it's an easy sell because if you look at the polling, most people believe housing is a human right. Certainly at Virtual, I've never known of a faith community that doesn't believe that housing is a human right, not a faith creed that doesn't treat housing as a human right, not a commodity. And if we can just put those actions, put those words into action, we really can empty the homeless shelters. We really can empty the streets of our cities and the encampments, and we can empty these eviction courts. And if we ever empty the eviction courts, I'm happy to not write a sequel, right? It'd be nice my students and I will find something else to do if we can actually to take the steps to end our housing crisis. So I've rattled on a while. I don't know what the timetable is that Terry and Sally have created, but if there's time for discussion, I'm happy to engage in it before the rest of your meeting.
Sure, we'd love some question and answers. People raise your Zoom hand or put a question in chat. Or I probably won't see if you raise your physical hand because I only see a few people. So
can't see everybody, so I'll just let Sally or Terry call on whoever.
Yeah. I will say that in New Jersey, to my knowledge, we do require cause for eviction. Dean, you got a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, being a lawyer for 49 years and doing evictions in Virginia, Fridays are eviction day. Mm-hmm. So you start with a 5-day paid and quit, and you go to court. Now, what happens in court? Now, if you tell a judge or somebody tells a judge that you're going to have some money soon, the judge will continue the case to another date, usually a month or so out. So we don't evict right away. The issue is where you're going to get your money. But if someone stands up and says from a church or some other organization that this money will come, then this money will come and the eviction action will be dismissed. We have a lot of small people, a lot of small landlords who are not heavily funded either. So they're living on a small margin and they need the money. We have problems with the situation where there's stuff that makes the house untenable or the unit untenable because the water doesn't run, no hot water, no electricity. And for many years, we were not able to take those monies and apply them like you were talking about in an escrow account. It was going to be a separate action, but that requires a lawyer to file the separate action. The clients that are coming in aren't those who are going to be hiring lawyers. But I also have seen, I had one amazing experience one day when these two people who were on I think they were on SSDI or SSI, and they got married. As soon as they got married, the federal SSI dropped, so they couldn't pay the rent. So they go in, and the judge turns to the landlord and he says, "How much do they owe?" And they've already explained that they can't pay the rent because they're not getting enough money from SSDI or SSI. And the guy says, "I think it was $90." Judge whips his hand into his pocket, pulls out his wallet, throws $90 on the floor, and he says, "Get out of here," and dismisses the case. So I have had that sort of experience. Now, in Virginia, we require that if you get a permit to build, you have to set aside, and you're building multiple houses, you have to set aside a certain amount of that housing for those low-cost housing issues that you talked about. So every time you get a permit in Fairfax County, you got to set aside 10% of what you're building so that it's for the homeless. We also, I'm on the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. We're working on a legislative proposal to allow a change in the zoning laws so that churches can donate land if they want to, because many of the churches that we see have large amounts of land. Maybe they got 20 people in the congregation, but they've got 20 acres because somebody in the past has given them 20 acres. They only need one, maybe 1.5 to run their services. The question is, will they be able to donate that money to build homeless housing for the homeless? So we also advocate heavily for money for housing, and the state does set aside a certain amount of money. It's always less than we want, but it's better than nothing at all. But I work with the immigrants a lot, and they're the ones who are being affected by all this. And actually, the anti-immigrant scenario in Trump's government right now is really affecting of the ability to help not only the immigrants, legal or illegal, but they're just part of the larger group of people who are, as you said, poor. They don't have enough money, and every time the car breaks down, or you have a medical situation, or what could be a workers' comp situation if it were for an independent contractor, those things are out there. So I agree with what you said.
I appreciate that, Dean. We can, if that judge wants to move to Indiana, we would love to have him. I just want to emphasize what you said there at the end, is that when the financial crises happen, and that's frankly the beauty of a subsidized housing situation. If you're in public housing and your income goes down, then your rent goes down. If you've got a voucher and your income goes down, the kid gets sick, the car breaks down, etc. Those folks can weather that storm. But if you're paying market rate, of course, that landlord still has bills they got to pay. The rent doesn't go down in private. So that's why, much more and better. So thank you for that interfaith advocacy. That seems to be the core of the fix, in locally, statewide, nationally as well.
Okay, so I was just typing to Brian.
Looks like Jay has.
In New Jersey, yeah, we do have, as I say, there needs to be a cause for an eviction. And I was actually with a friend who went to the eviction court. She was just having a dispute with her landlord because he wasn't keeping the property in good condition. And I went with her for moral support, and her son was there, and he spoke for her, and they got it postponed, and they ultimately got it resolved. But it's emotional, it's a real stress for people.
Some of the folks that do this are really inspired by Brian Stevenson's work. He talks about being proximal. I think instead of proximate, I think he uses the word proximal, but just getting close to it, and frankly, seeing the suffering. We're like, I'm not sure what I'm going to do about it, but when we do see it, the path usually becomes clear.
Yeah.
Looks like Jay.
Jay.
Oh, thanks.
Well, first of all, I really appreciated this overview that you gave, Fran. I'm like a lot of people, the procedures of eviction courts are largely invisible to me because I just don't. I'm not in a position to know, or haven't put myself into a position to educate myself. I do have a couple of technical questions. I gather that the eviction courts are a specialized court. They're not part of the superior court system or the run-of-the-mill judiciary system. And I'm wondering, do they operate? Are they operated mostly at the state level, at the county level, and how are the judges selected or appointed? What are the procedures for that?
Well, the eviction courts are like, the old saying about Unitarian congregations, right? You've been to one Unitarian congregation, you've been to one. Same thing with the eviction courts. They're to answer your question, they're super, super local. Even in our metropolitan county, we have 10 different eviction courts. They're different township courts most of them are elected by the members of the township. So they're called small claims courts. But there's other courts. The Superior Court actually runs an eviction docket, and you step outside of our county, it's different. And across the state, it's one of the real challenges. There's not great eviction data because every court system, collects it differently, stores it differently, even calls them different things. And sometimes it's, it's a possession case so it does, but it is definitely kind of the lowest rung, in my opinion, or my observation, and other lawyers or folks involved here could say kind of the lowest rung of the civil legal system. It's usually, something called small claims court, or sometimes even justice of the peace, etc. It's designed to run a whole lot of cases through, run big numbers, run them through quickly. Nobody wants to be there. Judges don't like it, the lawyers don't like it, etc. But it is designed to be like super efficient for the landlords. It's, a divorce case or a contract case or even a criminal case, they take months and months, if not years. In our state, an eviction, a person can get notice and be evicted within 10 days. And it's just, to be real cynical about it from the lawyer perspective, it's where due process goes to die. But that gets improved, frankly. It's like sunshine is the best disinfectant. When, church ladies and church men go and start sitting in the back of the court and start asking questions, then everybody starts behaving better, the lawyers and the judges, and then turns out the broader system does. So, like you say, most of us don't see that, and once we do see it, we start taking perspective.
Does that mean that somebody's mic is on, keeps interrupting? Does that mean that people in the gallery have standing to just stand up and comment during the proceedings? So you don't need to be a lawyer.
Not during the proceedings, but certainly, we all have the right to go. These are open court, unless it's a juvenile case or something like that. We can all go to court. It's all supposed to be public. But what happens is most of those judges are elected officials, and if they're not, they're appointed by elected officials. So they are pretty accountable to the public. We've never had a judge refuse to meet with the court watchers. And in fact, usually they've met with them many times and have taken their suggestions. Not to stand up and intervene in the individual case usually. But once you do see that, then sometimes what we have definitely had court watchers say, I just saw, Jane getting evicted and she had this defense that I don't think the judge listened to. Can you go talk to her? They'll come grab one of the lawyers, or if we're not there that day, they'll tell us afterward. And so they have actually identified not just practices, but individual cases. Frankly, if you it when you see it. If it's something that seems like it's unjust, it probably is. And
in Virginia,
okay, thanks.
In Virginia,
thank you for that.
It's an open courtroom. Usually the courtroom is full. I mean, people on the benches, but the judge will call the case, if you understand what I mean. He'll say, Mr. Quigley, and you come forward to one of the platforms in which you have a microphone, and the landlord will be at another one. These are the two people who are addressing the court, and the court will be asking questions of. If you want to talk to the judge, generally, until you get to the podium, you're not going to be popping up in the middle of the courtroom. because the bailiffs will escort you rapidly toward the back of the courtroom and out the door. If you complain, you can also go as far as the local jail because you'll be in contempt. But there are activities. The judges are in Virginia are elected by the General Assembly, our House of Delegates. And we have an opportunity as attorneys to review their behaviors. We can complain, at which time the judges, sometimes the judges are not renewed, and they're on for, let's say, 3 years, and they misbehave in with some fashion, and they're out of there. So there is that. But you can also go into chambers afterwards with a judge, maybe you and 3 or 4 others, and make a petition or make a case for doing one thing or another. The judges are just like you. They live in the neighborhood. You know, they don't live in a big house in DC with Trump. They are your neighbors. They go to church with you. They go to their kids go to your schools. You will see them. Talk to them. They speak English, I understand, most of them. And if you have something that you don't like, why not just petition on your own without a group of people behind you? So I always say advocacy goes 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. It's only your imagination which limits your ability to advocate. But you got to get off your chair and not ask somebody else to advocate. You actually have to pick up the microphone, get off your ass, and go down there and say what you think. You'll find a way to do
that. Carl?
I'm reading the book called Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond, and he wrote the book Evicted. And so this book, Poverty by America, kind of shows how wages and employment funnels people into the homeless situation. Their jobs are not secure. There's a quote, a statistic in this book that says of the 750,000 employees globally for Apple, only 63,000 work for the Apple company with the job protection, sick leave, and promotions. And so what corporations are doing is hiring subcontractors to do most of the work that they don't get their scientists and computer techs or whoever, engineers to do that work. So they hire people to do it without the job protections, and that's why many of them can end up unemployed. And one way they can make sure that they're not employed by leaving is that they have contracts or agreements that if you leave this job, you can't go work for somebody else.
Non-compete,
non-compete for months, weeks, maybe even a year. So that keeps people vulnerable, and it ensures that they don't leave the company, even though they're being hurt by low wages and poor working conditions. So that's an interesting book that I'm really looking forward to getting the whole message out of it.
Yeah, I know there has been some pushback about non-compete clauses because they are so overused, even in things like fast food and things that you don't have any. For an executive who knows company secrets, that's one thing, but for your average worker, no, absolutely.
So one of the things I think being in reparations, this concept fits directly into reparation, and because there is evil behind these policies, and it is heartlessness behind these policies, and that is exactly what I think gave rise to the chattel enslavement consciousness that brought on chattel enslavement, Jim Crow, et cetera, and et cetera. And so that's one of the things I look at is where's the evil? And that's one of the things I think if we want to be successful in reparations, we have to look at the evil that we're up against. Martin Luther King, I think, came out and said it best. He said the only way to get uh, rights is by winning hearts.
Mm-hmm.
You got to win hearts before you can get to the humanity that stops chattel enslavement, Jim Crow, et cetera, and et cetera. So that's why I can tie in this topic very easily with reparations.
That's great. Carl, there's a whole chapter in the book is on racism and housing, that they just, long history of redlining and government assistance provided to housing for white folks, but not for families of color, and it's led to inequities in health. And we have we do something at the start of the semester. We spend the first few weeks going to this particular court in one township in Indianapolis. And then I ask the students what they think the population of the township is race-wise. And they say, oh, I think it's 80% Black. And it's not, it's 30% Black, but the folks being evicted are 80% Black. And you see that for our homelessness. You see folks who are housing insecure, folks being evicted, just huge racial disparities that go back to our historic. And so the city of Evanston, Illinois, actually started reparations programs and started with housing. They started with simply having families of color being access to housing assistance to try to start making up for some of the generational damage that we've caused. That's great.
Clyde?
Yeah, here in Omaha, we have a 14-story elderly apartment building, and it's been purchased a few years ago by an out-of-town corporation. And the conditions have deteriorated a lot. A lot of advocates for the occupants were primarily low-income people, for advocating to, the city to put pressure on getting the landlord to clean up the situation, get the fire alarms working, those elevators not working, and so forth. Finally, the situation got so bad in June, the city declared the building is not safe for occupancy. And so they ordered everybody, the 121 units has to move out. And so it's kind of a situation where you want to advocate for people in these low-income housing. But if it winds up getting the people kicked out because the city says it's unfit for occupancy, it's kind of a double-edged sword situation.
Thank you, Clyde. It seems like every city has a 15-story downtown building. We have one where we have a third different lawsuit, a 15-story, 250-unit building, where they're threatening the same thing right now. And that, you say, you're right, that's just it's a horrible building. It's a horrible place for people to live, but it's better than the streets. And that's the alternative if they, the elevators are broken, etc. And so I just hate that that's such a common fight. But what, those aren't accidents. We have neglected those buildings for so long. Old buildings can be beautiful, well-maintained buildings. We know that. Every urban community has really beautiful apartment buildings that high-end people live in and will pay millions of dollars for condos, but you've got to maintain the buildings. And when they've neglected them for so long, they're in that spot. And that's kind of a downside of relying on a voucher system. These folks, even if they get a voucher, they got to find a landlord who will take the voucher. And is that unit going to be accessible? Is it going to be near grocery stores or near where their healthcare needs are, or their family to support them is? And so as bad as these buildings are, until we have something else, that's we can't just abandon those folks.
Well, you need to talk about the effects of gentrification, because in a building like that, somebody's going to come in, buy the building from the other company, rip out all the apartments, and then it's going to be upscale, expensive apartments for people who are making, I don't know, $500,000 a year. I'm just picking a number here, $500,000 a year in a very fine place. But the question is, what happens to the people who are making $500 a month? Where do they go? And there's no answer to that question yet.
Right. And I must say, at least in our community, I don't know if that's true for you, Clyde, the advocates, the most effective advocates for the folks in the building that are facing the displacement, our clinic and others we're doing a lawsuit, But the community advocates have been people from the faith community, from the interfaith community. We've got a rabbi and a Black Baptist minister have joined together, and I think they're the only reasons that building is still open because they've kind of shamed the local officials into not yet abandoning these people. So there's power in these interfaith groups. I don't need to tell you all that. I'm sure you all are already involved in those. But I love the fact that you're focused on economic justice because that's that kitchen table grocery store justice and pay the rent justice is what our clients are focused on too.
I keep reminding my UU folks that, we're the moral voice. We get to ask for everything we want. Let them compromise down the road, but we stand up for what's right. Yeah. Just a blip.
With the problem of crappy buildings, we have rental inspectors in our community, and I think it really helps because it means that nobody can let their building slide into slum easily. I mean, they will stay on you and make sure things are safe, that your furnace gets inspected, and that you have ground fault plugs in your water and things like that. I can see where you may not have much of an inspection system where they're going to condemn a whole building. They let it go too far. Of course, Florida has a really interesting thing going on right now. With the collapse of the building in what was it, Surfside, I believe, Florida, part of Miami Beach. They the legislature has taken it up and legislated that all buildings that are over, I think it's 30 years old, have to bring everything up and have inspections and upgrades. And you need to do that by the end of the year. Well, 70% of the buildings in Florida are more than 30 years old. And if you do the math, you're going to understand if we set all the contractors from across the country into Florida, they couldn't get that work done in 6 months that's left, not 5 months to the end of the year. I don't know if they're hoping buildings get condemned and they can flip them or something.
Oh, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's really made housing condos in Florida. The values have dropped considerably, and you'd want to be really, really careful if you're going to buy one because you might buy a $200,000 building or condo and find out that you've got $400,000 assessment, special assessment. That's why that one building fell. Uh, the condo owners have been arguing for years about not wanting to spend that much money, and finally it flattened them like pancakes, but which is not funny. So at any rate, that's what's going on there. Do we have any more questions for Fran? We don't want to keep them all day long.
I just want to say thank you, Fran, and Dean, and other people who've spoken, Jay and the rest. Dean, I think you ought to run for governor of Florida if you want to come down here. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you so much.
He doesn't like Florida, at least that's what he told me. He couldn't understand why we would go there.
No, I appreciate what you all are doing and want to continue to be involved and engaged. And I dressed up not just for you, but we have a family wedding. So this is otherwise I'd stay for the whole meeting. But I hope to join future meetings. And if anything I can do to be of support, if you and your congregations want to look into this more, happy to do it. It's a real honor to be able to do it. So
Thank
yeah,
you.
Fran, you'd said you have a lot of videos that explain this. I'm hoping we can get together a video curriculum for housing to be in congregations' hands before too terribly long. If you have if you have anything assembled on that, I'd like to see it and see what we can do to get a curriculum in people's hands.
Well,
Absolutely.
I do a lot of advocacy, so I always like talking points. So
Yeah.
if you have, I'm sure you must have talking points on various issues. I would be happy to be the recipient because sometimes I can use those talking points to get my organizations involved in certain activities, but I have to explain what it is that I'm trying to do, and that would help me tremendously.
Okay. I can do that, and I have Terry's and Sally's email. I'll send it to them, and they can send it on to you along with a list of videos. Happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you all. Appreciate
That's
you.
great. Thank you, Fran. Have a good day and wedding and everything.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Enjoy. Okay.
Okay. And
Here
now
we go.
Sally's in charge of the
All
meeting.
right. So Jane and Carl, let's talk finances. How are we doing at UUJC? Carl?
Sorry, I was muted there.
There you go. Okay.
This is Jane. And what we're looking at here are our last 3 years of income and expenses, as well as our budget for 2025. In 2022 and 2023, you can see our income and expenses. We're in about the $20,000 range, and income was fairly close to expenses. Things weren't so good last year. I think mainly because we didn't manage to run our normal annual appeal. So our income amounts were below what they normally are. We're projecting somewhat similar situation for this year, but we're doing a fairly good job of keeping our expenses to the minimum while still providing programming. Do you want to go on to the next? Yeah, thanks. So this next chart looks in particular at our expenses and income through 2025. The blue bar there is the budget in half. What our budget is through the first 6 months of the year. The orange bar shows how much we've actually spent or taken in, and the yellow bar is the difference between the two. We're doing fairly well as far as holding our expenses down, and income is not as great as we'd like, but it's acceptable. Although, please, we welcome donations from folks. And we do have a new income line, which is interest income. We've deposited $12,000 in a local community bank, and while the income isn't great, we're at least receiving a bit of interest from it and helping a worthy community cause to a certain extent too. So that's where we are.
Comments, questions?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
Thanks to Terry, my Virginia State Action Network received a $19,000 grant from UUA. Do we ever ask for grants for anything that we do?
Yes.
I didn't see. Is that considered income? I mean, is that part of the projection right there?
Yeah, that would be. Let me go back to that slide. That would be part of the red section is grants, conference registrations, and other income. The blue area is individual and congressional donations. We have gotten grants from the UUA funding project in the past. We have gotten Jane, you can probably talk more about.
Right. And for the most part, when we're asking for grants, it's usually for a conference or some specific project that we have underway. But yes, we do ask for grants. We could certainly be more aggressive about it, but that's a good way to think about or attempt to take in more income.
Now we last year we got $1,500 for stamps because we do some postcarding, and right now postcard stamps I think are 80 cents a piece. It's not like the old day when you put a 5-cent stamp on a postcard.
Right, right.
And so we helped a number of our congregations, the UU congregations in Virginia, to defer or address their stamp issues because some people weren't signing up to do stamps because they didn't want to spend. Let's say you had 50 postcards. Well, now you're at $45. Well, maybe you have $45 or not. You have $45 worth of joy in signing the postcards, but you're not so joyous about putting the stamp on.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I recommend that if we have individual things that we can ask, we might get a positive response for a specific program. So I just suggest we think about things that we could quantify and have a financial aspect to them. So that's my thought.
Good idea. Thank you.
I will mention at this point that the board is planning a retreat for a couple of afternoons in August, and some of the suggestions that come up here will be topics there. So keep them coming. All right, on to healthcare. I don't know that Judy is here. So we're continuing to support Medicare for all, both Senator Sanders and Representative Jayapal's bills. And I point out that one of my co-activists back in 2010 with Affordable Care Act was a Republican who looked at the numbers and looked at his nurse friend and said, you know what, this saves money, they should do this. So we need to, if they're really serious about saving money, if it's not all smoke and mirrors and Doge, then they should support it too. This is something for everyone, not partisan. We are opposing privatization and prior authorization. We just discovered that Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services wants to bring prior authorization to traditional Medicare, and they're starting with 6 states in January 2026, including my own New Jersey, because Dr. Oz is a New Jerseyan, damn it, and the 5 others that you see there, Ohio, Oklahoma, Texas, Arizona, and Washington. I hope we can push back and stop that from happening, but we should do all we can to limit it if we can't. And you know, the big ugly bill had lots of cuts, so lots of for us to do. Meanwhile, Medicare and Medicaid are turning 60, so we need to celebrate that because they have been pretty effective for a long time, and we have to both celebrate that and raise the alarm.
Ellie, would you explain prior authorization?
Yeah. Prior authorization is when you go to your doctor and the doctor wants to do X, but he has to check with the insurance company first because they have to decide whether they want to pay for it or whether they want you to do something else first, like use a generic medication before a name brand or something else before. Basically, and you know, they're putting the insurance company in between you and your doctor. And often they will, you know, review it by a medical person. But a medical person who's working for an insurance company has an incentive to do what the insurance company wants and not necessarily listen to your doctor. So that's something that has not been part of traditional Medicare. And, you know, they're always raising the fraud bill, which, the fraud alarm, which is way less than they would have you believe. And, you know, yeah, there are a couple of bad actors and they catch some every once in a while who, you know, a provider who is scamming the system, and they'll stamp on those. But mostly, it's not there, and it's it's not the kind of thing that you're going to catch with prior authorization. So, yeah,
I think more education needs to happen on that because
okay,
somehow I've missed that totally.
Yeah, I stumbled across it recently and went, oh my God, what are they doing? So yeah, I will, because I know they've been trying to privatize everything as much as possible, especially this administration. And, you know, the health insurance has wandered into Medicare for a long time. That's why they developed this Medicare Advantage, which we call Medicare Disadvantage, because, and actually, United Healthcare is currently being investigated for its bad practices. The Medicare Advantage program in general is paid 14% more than traditional Medicare providers. It's, it's a corporate ripoff, and we need to jump on as much of it as we can, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Anybody else, or do we go onward? Okay. Is Cindy here? I don't know that she made it.
No, Cindy's not here. She can't get in.
Oh no. Right. Well, I think she maybe. I'm not sure which way she crossed the border recently. Her son is down in Mexico, so
I think she might be back in the States, but
yeah, yeah.
it's asking for the meeting password. Do you have a
Oh,
meeting password? Passcode?
I don't. But if she clicks on the registration link, she should be able to. Okay.
She
If
can't
Carl
do
could
that.
talk about reparations, I will try and get Cindy into the meeting. Okay. Well, all right. So here's our slide. Carl, are you able to talk a little bit about what you're doing over at the Reparations Task Force, or Jane?
Carl, are you available to speak?
Yes, you want me to kind of overview our reparations program?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, what we're doing, we have developed a six-session reparations program that we like to present to congregations or social justice groups or any other group of people that might be interested in that. So we have developed that. We're always in the stage of refining it, but we feel that it's composed of videos and presentations and articles that will help congregations come to grips with the I guess the task of being successful with a social justice initiative like reparations. As I made a comment earlier, reparations is big. Reparation to me is no longer just a travesty against people of color, because everyone suffers. I mean, you can look at those statistics of housing courts, evictions, and you can look at the statistic of job security, and you can track that back in many ways to those evils and cruelties of humanity that we have in our society. So we really want to get the point across that reparation is in all of the manifestations of humanity and culture in our nation, and I would imagine it's true for other nations as well. But yeah, we want to look at getting people involved in this, and maybe signing up for those 6-session presentations. And there's a lot of interaction we want to cultivate in those presentations in that series. So we're looking for that type of relationship. And like on the last category there, we believe the factors that gave rise to the U.S. legacy of chattel enslavement also fuels our culture's isms in our 21st century. So they're not unrelated. And I think that we want to make sure that people know that they're not just working for people of color. They're working for the rights of workers. They're working for the rights of individuals in housing complexes. So I would invite questions if you have any that that may not have been given in this presentation. I didn't know I was going to give it, but anyway, we want to make reparations visible and minimize its effect, but to make people aware of its maximized expansion into all aspects of our culture, from labor to housing to crime. And yeah, I hope there's questions, and I've just certainly perused this very quickly, but I hope you have some questions, and I'll be glad to respond to them.
Well, I think what you said at one of the earlier meetings made sense, a great deal of sense to me, because reparations, I get blowback when I say, "Oh, we're going to give a bunch of money to people because somebody was enslaved in the past, and of course they're no longer here. We don't even know if the people we're going to give money to are those who are related to them." But what made sense to me was what you said was that we do reparations because of the deprived economic and educational opportunities that those who were enslaved didn't have. So if they'd had those opportunities in the past, regardless of whether or not they have descendants now, that money would have lifted us as a society up, because those people would have been able to get better jobs, better education, better health care, because they would have had money in the past that they could have invested in their own culture and lifestyle. And I think that's an important consideration. That's what sells me on the benefit of reparations, to give people the opportunity, kind of like an act in which we give assets to people so they can improve their lives in accordance with their own values. So I would like to get this, and to me, the first step of advocacy is always education. We've discovered the problem. Now we need to have advocacy to change people's minds, because there are a lot of people who don't understand. When you say reparations, they start reaching for their wallet, and maybe
Right.
maybe they don't reach for their wallet. Maybe they bury their wallet. But all this money is going to come out of state legislatures or the federal government, and getting money out of the federal government these days is not easy.
Okay.
So those are my thoughts. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. And getting money out of the federal government is certainly not as passing a buck to our government to pay the way for people who don't need it. I think Fran mentioned that in his presentation, is that, that money goes to corporations and groups that are the money makers, and not to the people who really need it. So yeah, so it seems to me that reparation is, and the reaction, the blowback on reparation is intended because it diverts people's attention to the real problem. It's like, if we're talking about African Americans not getting a college education, that's going to be, I think, a distraction from the fact that there are other groups, and the primary group, the majority group, that's also not getting educations. So, yeah, I think the isms, and that's what I look at, all of the isms like racism, sexism, classism, etc. They're all diversions and distractions from any one of those issues getting a lot of attention, get the focus and of the people's, I guess you might call it, outcry against the injustice that they're suffering. Any more questions?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just thinking that we had this presentation from Fran about how the majority of our housing subsidies go to the affluent
Mhm.
in the form of tax subsidies and things like
Yeah.
that. It seems like you can make then a strong case for reparations related to what you might call the classism issue, is that we should have reparations to the poor, those who are coming to the eviction courts, because they're not getting that they should have an entitlement to basic housing, just like for we have, as you pointed out, the Medicaid and
Mhm.
healthcare and everything else like that. We could say, well, there's a case for reparations for people who've been denied an entitlement to basic housing, even though we pour huge amounts of money into subsidies for the affluent.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might end in tragedy, like Terry was saying, the constant argument on the housing complex in Florida eventually fell and hurt, destroyed the lives of many people. It's like that seemed like it was a distraction, not a distraction, but it's like that's where some of the problems are. It's like I don't want to spend money. I want to make my highest profit that I can.
Mhm.
And that to me is a way of focusing on just money is a way of really getting people's interest because people do need money. Everybody needs money. In fact, I would say the majority of the people in this country needs more money for housing, for medicine, for just recreation if they have that kind of leisure. But yeah, and therefore they miss the impact of this low wages, high expenses, and it just does not seem like there's not room enough for another government program that that can successfully uh, prevent people from, number one, getting kicked out, evicted from their apartments, or being homeless. So, yeah, that's one of the things too that I think we want to make clear in our 6-point session is that the isms are perfect distractors from really working on the problem of what we're looking at and what I think we need to look at. So it's kind of a expansion of people's points of view and not to see any group as parasites
Mhm.
or corruptors.
Mhm. All right. We'll give Cindy a little more chance. Bob and I will talk about GA, and then if Cindy's not here, oops, I'm trying to share. Oh, okay. I am sharing. Okay. If Cindy's not here, then I will talk about what they're doing over there, or Lucy can. Bob, you want to start with the CSAI?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll try to be brief, which is a challenge for me, but I'll do my best to be brief. And I think most of you know the details, and I hope that Dick and Sally and others, Terry, will add to the conversation. But first of all, the Housing Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion CSAI obviously was proposed. The first discussion, by the way, with the UUJC was in September of last year. So we've spent the better part of a year working on this. We were told early on by the Commission on Social Witness they did not want to review any topic that had been addressed in the last 25 years by a statement of conscience or an AIW. So topics like Medicare and world peace and drugs and other issues that we were interested in were off the table. These issues had already been addressed. Housing is a major concern in Florida, every other place, I think, in North America, probably in the world. And there's a group of Florida congregations. We decided 7 of us, actually, congregations, and 2 clusters to focus on housing as a topic that for some reason had often been vaguely referred to in UUA statements, but it never really received, including some UUJC statements, but it never really received a lot of attention. And the message was very simple. We want to provide everybody with access, and everybody means everybody, access to housing that is safe, affordable, sustainable, and acceptable for the residents, places where people genuinely want to live. So with that in mind, we got together with the equal access people, disability rights people, class conversations. People were very helpful, Denise Moorhead and others. And we reached out to other groups too, some of which basically told us to go to hell. They didn't want to get involved in that stuff, but we won't mention any names. But the 3 groups really worked together at the national level. The thing went through a lot of drafts. There was finally a big open discussion on May 5th, where I think about 50 people came together from around the country, and comments came in from all kinds of places, and then some written comments. And it went to the General Assembly. Keep in mind, there has not been a CSAI, a major call for study and action, for at least 7 or 8 years. The whole thing has been canceled by the UUA board for about 7, 8 years. So this was our big moment to come back and raise these issues of concern at the grassroots, and partly in response to the Trump administration, to meet the moment. So we got up in front of the General Assembly and we won. Hooray! You know, the delegates actually endorsed the proposal. Fran Quigley was there with us, very supportive. A lot of the inspiration for the statement came from Fran, a lot of guidance. And then, as Sally can explain, it was immediately challenged, the victory. And there were protests that the moderator had been unfair or done something or another, I'm not sure what. And so there was a second vote and a new way of handling it with ranked order and some other stuff. And on the second vote, we lost. So we have been back in touch with the original sponsors in Florida to try to get some consensus about what to do next. Today, of course, we're talking with the UUJC, but I've been in touch with Equal Access, class conversations, other groups, trying to get things back together to go back to the General Assembly again. And I think, you know, we're beginning to outline a plan, which we hope the UUJC will be interested in. First of all, yeah, we're going to bring some kind of statement back to the 26th General Assembly on housing justice. It'll be very similar in many ways. And the next year's GA, I think, is entirely virtual, so it'll be easier for different groups to plug into it. Fran Quigley is a major speaker to explain, and people from the different groups who are really concerned about housing justice. There's some other possibilities that have come up, the possibility of a task force on just housing issues similar to other task forces that UUJC supports, and looking at issues that we've mentioned because of Fran's presentation, getting into questions about reparations, concern about homeless people. I'd like to add a little bit more about long-term care arrangements. We didn't really say much about what housing looks like for older people and people with disabilities. But really, that's another possibility. Maybe some kind of educational program. Carl has mentioned a program about reparations, maybe one on housing that includes some of that information, and be prepared to go into the 26th General Assembly with some really good presentations behind us, and see if we can have a victory that really will be a victory, that will remain a victory and not be immediately challenged and kicked out. We had a lot of feedback on the housing statement. A lot of people had different suggestions. Some of them got incorporated, some did not. At one point, I'm not making this up, folks, the thing was literally 10 pages long, 8.5 by 11. That's not a hand up. That's just me promising that it was 10 pages long. We were told to get it down to 4. The feedback was interesting. the two major complaints that I heard, well, I heard several, but the two major ones were people wanted more time to study this. And they felt that somehow they were being rushed into a lot of activist type stuff, and they wanted to study more. And again, as Fran's pointed out, people don't understand things like eviction courts. They don't understand corporate real estate arrangements. Sometimes even basic health and safety issues are poorly understood. And I agree that there should have been more study time. There was also a lot of concern expressed about spiritual transformation, and which is rather interesting. I think a lot of people don't feel personally invested in some of these topics that come before the General Assembly. They don't, I'm going to be frank, they don't feel spiritually moved by the situation. So we did add some additional language, and we talked about roots of religious concern and opportunity to really get involved with hands-on activities. I think there was even a passing reference to habitat, I think was in there, to get to understand who these people are who are being abused in the housing market, what they're like, to relate to them, maybe to come to a better understanding of personal experiences that we already have, young and old. So that was an important issue, which I think needs more attention. What are the spiritual, religious roots for our involvement in this? And there were other topics that came up, and I'll send out some notes before the retreat on where we might go with this. So that, and I hope that Terry and Sally and Dick will add their own comments about what happened at the General Assembly. Mutual aid got some attention at the GA. Once again, I don't think most people understand what mutual aid involves. Some think it's just a new word for charity. No, there's a whole philosophy of mutual aid. It's been around for at least 150 years, and probably all the way back to prehistoric times. And I think UUs need a better understanding of what's under that mutual aid umbrella. We had a mutual aid meetup, though. A number of people showed up, but it sort of got disrupted by what was going on with the housing crisis there, and the people wanted the second vote. But we had a good exchange of opinions. We've started up a little discussion group, and again, spiritual transformation is part of the discussion. Let's see, we had a video, a little video, got some exposure about mutual aid and food justice. I got to wear a black apron, which is sort of a symbol of mutual aid. It says "Side with Love" across it, and so that's another topic that we'll continue with, and that's about it up to the hour. But a lot is happening. Obviously, Trump is trying to crack down even more on homelessness. He's done some nasty stuff. The ICE raids continue. Alligator Alcatraz is now in business, probably has about 750 people, and it's been built for 5,000. I don't know how many they may wind up with. And there's a need for emergency shelter, and I could go on and on about other housing related issues, including something that Fran sort of referred to in Florida, at least, which is called the aging of home, or the graying of homelessness. The fact that many of the people who are now out on the streets are older people and some younger people with disabilities who just don't have access to the kind of support that they need, and know they're not going to go back and get a job to pay for whatever. Although there are many working people who are homeless.
Oh, yeah.
That's about it for the hour, I guess.
Right.
Other comments? Thank you for those of you who've been supporting this housing and justice initiative. Like I say, we started last September, and several of you were very helpful as the project moved forward. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So the issue with the vote was that for the first time, this is really for later, GA had programming for delegates opposite the business meeting, which I always personally thought was a really bad idea. I think the main purpose of GA is to do the organization's business, and we should leave that alone by itself. But And they informed everybody that, oh, it's okay. You can miss that part of the general session. Nothing important will happen. Well, except for like the study action issue discussion. So that's why everybody was so upset. And instead of in the past, as they had in the past, saying, sorry, can't redo elections, either were getting better at repairing harm or the decision wasn't what they wanted. We don't know. Either way, they did decide to redo the election. And because there was only one day left, they did ranked choice voting, which we have used to elect presidents in the past at the UUA. So it wasn't that new to us. And it flipped to abolition is faith formation. And, there's an intersection there. People who come out of prison have problems with housing. They can't live in public housing because they're convicted, and so they can't live with their families if that's where they were in the past. So there's a lot that we can kind of merge as we go forward. So we're not ignoring what the UA is doing, but housing is enough of a problem that we got to stick with that as well. So.
Hello? Can I say
Anybody?
something? Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they did screw up in allowing some of that programming to happen at the same time as the business session, and people complained that they legitimately that they weren't allowed to be there for part of the debate.
They were allowed.
But I also suspect that they made a big deal of it because it didn't go the way they wanted. I think both are true. And then the ranked choice voting was I think okay. But what had really bothered me is that the other two CSAIs were not formulated in terms of a traditional CSAI. They were both centered around what I would call revolutionary slogans, like fat liberation or abolish. And if you look at the abolish one that eventually passed, the only constructive action they actually talked about in the text was the ultimate goal of abolishing the prison industrial complex. And it's sort of like they want a spiritual transformation that is centered around revolutionary kinds of ideologies and actions. But a lot of us have some doubts about that. We think that's not the best thing for a society that's highly polarized already, and it's coming apart at the seams because of this kind of polarization. So some of us were unhappy by how this was put together, and it happened that I spoke first of all on the first day, put a strong statement of support in at the pro mic on Zoom, actually in this case for Bob Murphy's proposal. I think that was well received. And then I looked at what was going to happen with the other two, and I put comments in the online discussion group, discuss.ua.org. Basically, what I wanted to say at the forward comment the next day, and in particular on the abolish issue, I expressed myself that this needed a lot more constructive suggestions. It comes across as a revolutionary slogan: tear it all down. What are you going to replace it with? That's not the kind of thing that builds public confidence or tries to find some commonality with the other sides, you see. And so in my comment, I put down some constructive suggestions. And even though they didn't like what I had been saying all along, the next day, the first pro speaker at the Abolish CSI, Mike, included my suggestions into his talk, even though it hadn't been in the text. So I think we did have some influence there, and hopefully in the future, they'll try to do CSIs that are constructive and not just sort of destructive and revolutionary. Because I think that's the problem of our society now, revolution from the right or left. So that's sort of my take on it. And also the vote that went in favor of the abolish one was maybe a little less than 2/3, whereas last year the vote that went in favor of replacing the 7 principles was 80+%, over 80%. And my feeling was that they were, in both cases, they were trying to appeal to a younger crowd that wants to take revolutionary action, not only against the bad guys out there, but us bad guys in the UUA who wanted to keep the set of principles. So that's some of my reflections on this.
Thank you. Anyone else? Can I move us along?
Harry, do you have any thoughts on any of this?
Well, yeah, and I don't know that it's constructive, but my empathy goes towards abolition. However, two of the biggest advocates, Angela Davis and her sister Fania, will tell you that they have no replacement for it. And it seems really difficult to not have some proposal on how do we get rid of this crappy system if we don't have a replacement for it.
Well, I disagree that there's not a replacement for it. There's no one single replacement, and there will probably always be some people who need to be kept away from society. However, restorative justice can take a lot of the minor things and some of the major things. We've done a couple of book discussions in New Jersey on Until We Reckon by Danielle Sered, which has some very practical examples of restorative justice in place. And it takes a culture shift for sure. And it's not going to happen overnight. But so I have some allegiance to that topic as well, but we can't do it all.
Well, if for small things, one of the big issues for me is removing people from our community. And Trump has just made that worse. He's not only going to put them in a remote place in your own state, he's going to ship them to Africa. And, you take states like Hawaii, they ship their prisoners to Tennessee, which is horrible. I mean, you want to integrate people who've had problems. You don't want to segregate and ostracize them. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah,
but we're getting
unfortunately,
probably off topic.
Yeah, we have a very revengeful mainstream, punishment-oriented mainstream culture, which needs to change.
Would David Delk be able to help with the peace, equity, and climate?
Sure, but let's just finish off GA first.
Okay.
We have the big topic was Meet the Moment, and they had 10 cohorts, which I've listed here: worktional, anti-racism, anti-oppression, national emerging adult, guided by youth, administrative competence, beyond generosity, fundraising, caring for parents, shaping emerging UU future, whole church religious education, and queer and trans communities. They were reporting on work that had been done in the spring. There are new fall waves being set up. If you go and search the UUA.org site for Meet the Moment, you can get on the mailing list, which I did. And so I'll be keeping our organization informed of what's going on there. And the other big thing was the new online hymnal, which is by subscription. And my immediate reaction was, oh God, another subscription. I'm I want to just buy something and own it. I don't like this whole subscription economy. However, it's pretty awesome. You can transpose things into multiple keys. They have all kinds of information on the songs, and they're going to be updating it continually. So a subscription makes sense.
A friend of mine told me that evangelicals don't have music over 5 years old, that they turn it over to keep things fresh. And where I adore some of our old hymns, it makes sense to keep things fresh.
Well, that is what they will be doing. And of course, we had somebody at one of the sessions sing a Raging Granny song, and as the UUA his commentary on one of the topics. And they take all the old songs that everybody is familiar with, and they put new up-to-date lyrics on them, and they march around and so yeah, there are many options.
One of my favorite songs, Blue Boat Home, we were listening to some Irish music, and there it was.
Yep. All right. David, will you be able to talk to us about peace, equity, climate and what's happening there?
Oh, so obviously I'm not prepared to do
I
that.
know.
But let's see what Cindy has written. We continue our webinar series with the focus on environmental problems and solutions, including the appalling lack of consideration of military emissions in just about any context. So that is that question about the military emissions is very important. The whole question about the military is very important. The way that the military expenditures for the military distract, subtract from monies that are available for addressing our other many important problems, including healthcare, housing, paying minimum wage, and so forth, or increasing minimum wage. So then she says, we are looking forward to Cindy again being a badged virtual delegate to the COP in November and her report back to us on her return. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory. We continue to meet monthly on the third Tuesday, still at 5:30 Eastern. And we focus on networking, developing relationships with like-minded others within the UU universe and beyond. So those are all pretty self-explanatory. So she of course is very focused on the military, but we also have a focus on equity. So I'm hoping that we'll do more in terms of the equity question. And one thing that particularly is of interest to me is that the federal minimum wage is $7 and some cents still after I think it was changed to that in 1996, as I recall. And there is a proposal to raise it to $17 an hour in Congress. So and even the $17 is not a living wage. And that was one of the things that our speaker said, was that most of the people who are in the eviction court are making $17 an hour. So that certainly demonstrates how even that $17 an hour is not adequate. So we have work to do, and I would like to be focused on doing that. And then talking about wealth taxes and so some other things that we can do. So and I'm not very focused on the climate. It's one of those things where, yes, I'm really, really concerned about it, but I'm not focused on it, so I won't talk about it.
Okay. And David is going to be part of a webinar in 2.5 weeks on nuclear weapons and on nuclear power.
Yes.
Which the title of it is Nuclear Power Isn't Worth It at Any Price. And then your part is
I forgot what I titled my part, so I can't fill it in.
Yeah. Nuclear weapons are horrible, basically.
Yeah. Well, my part will be looking at nuclear weapons in particular. And that will actually be a small part of the webinar, which is on August 14th. And most of the time will be focused on two advocates here in Oregon who have been working on the question of nuclear power and how do we control or how do we get rid of it for decades. They're both really good speakers. It will be definitely worth your while to attend.
Nuclear power, which they keep trying to say is, peaceful atoms and nuclear military are so interconnected.
Yes.
And the latest NRC meeting that I attended was one the Trump administration has asked them to reconsider the linear no threshold radiation exposure limits, which is basically says that any exposure to radiation is dangerous, which there is scientific proof for all over the place, but they want, industry would like to have a level that's okay, which with the NRC rejected 4 years ago, but they're pushing back. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad that that has gotten far enough that you're able to talk about that, Sally.
yeah. All right. I think that's basically all we have in terms of presentations. Is kids
We
still
have the workshops, so I think Bob had something to say about those. He usually has something to say about everything, so
Oh,
he can
well,
probably wing it.
I don't think I have anything to say about the workshops except, well, we need more of them. Thank you.
Okay. Kit, are you around to moderate our discussion? We'd like to know how UUJC can be more helpful to folks who are here. Anything you want to, any feedback on what we had today? Any feedback on what we're doing generally?
Sounds easy. The floor is now open.
Raise your Zoom hand or, yeah. Lucy?
Topic going once.
I'm sorry,
ID
I
going
can't.
twice. Oh, there's Brian. What you got to say, Brian?
I belong to a suburban church in Carrollton, Texas, a suburb of Dallas. There's 250 members, mostly white, mostly upper middle class. I'm on the Social Justice Committee, and what's going on is that people come to the Social Justice Committee, it's the same old people. People are stretched thin and worn out and burnout, and people are leaving. Neither people new to the church or people from the congregation who are new to social justice aren't coming, but nobody wants to have the conversation about the process of what it is that we're trying to do. Maybe we need to focus and cut back. I'm wondering if anybody has any suggestions about that situation.
Well, my suggestion is do a potluck with your social justice meeting and put it on a weeknight because people talk a lot more over food than they do just at a meeting. And if you're going to have working people, you can't make them do very much on a work night, a weeknight, but they would come to a potluck.
Are you saying hold it on a weeknight or don't hold it
Yeah,
on?
if you
Yeah.
can. I mean,
You're
it
saying
depends on
hold
the
it on a
size of your
weeknight instead of a
community.
weekend.
The problem in big cities, and if your people are coming from 45 minutes away, that isn't going to help much. But if Carlton or Carrollton is a fairly small town, then having it on a weeknight works out fine. They get dinner and can have a nice conversation and get together.
People come from all over. Carrollton has 130,000 population. Dallas First Unitarian is way bigger, has 1,000 members and 2 ministers.
I found that meeting after service on Sunday sometimes works because people are already there. And so, encourage people to brown bag lunch or send out for pizzas or whatever. We had this was a while ago, pre-COVID, but when we discussed immigration as a moral issue, as a statement of conscience, we did a potluck on a Sunday evening, and I got 20 people, which didn't seem like much, but it was about 10%, 15% of the congregation. So I figured that was pretty good. But yeah, seafood. Yeah. Bob?
Best advice I ever got on social justice and congregations came from a Sunday school director, religious ed director in North Carolina, who said, find out what your people are really concerned about in their own lives. And she said, what is it that keeps them up late at night? So are they worried about the cost of college education? Are they worried about, I don't know, public transportation? I suppose housing, healthcare, whatever it might be. But what are they concerned about in their lives? Don't try to do a big shame number on them or make them feel guilty or whatever. And she was right. And if you can connect to those issues and demonstrate some opportunities for progress, I think social justice will start to come together.
Yeah, I think that's really important. There are people who go, well, I really think this is a problem, but I'm so busy or whatever. You've got to want to do it. If you don't want to do it, there's no reason to try to drag people into it. I do have a question for you, Brian. We'd love to have somebody on our board from Texas. Do you know any eager beavers who would have an hour or two a month that they could spend with us, or three or four?
I do not right now.
Well, think about it. I
Yeah.
wouldn't expect you to have it
Yeah,
on the tip of your
I
tongue.
appreciate, in the past year, I'm not sure why I didn't know about all this stuff. And I wasn't really told about it at church, but I enrolled in, I attended the adult RE program, Love at the Center.
Okay.
And I had questions about the UUA, and I've discovered things that I didn't know about, like the Earth Ministry, the Social Justice
Yeah.
Council, the UUJEC. And so that's all been kind of interesting to me.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. We have an animal ministry. What else do we? There's just a whole lot of them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, Terry, in the past, we had a UUJC board member from Austin, Texas, Mike Ignatowski, who in fact is still very active, but he at one point went off our board. So it's there have been some people who know about us there.
Yeah, thanks so much for all the suggestions. I've heard some good things.
We for a while did well with a film festival at Central Unitarian. We had we went out and found Brave New Films, and some of the others will let you screen in a church at no cost. You have to check out the various films. It worked for about 3 years, and then people got tired of it. We retired it and had to bring it back. So a program like that may be of interest. Lucy, I saw you had your hand up a while ago.
Yeah, sorry. Somehow I can't do the official hand raising on my computer. My comment is really directed towards our next meeting on long range planning, but many things have come up in this meeting about things that we would like to inform congregations about more, like, housing and all kinds of things we've talked about today, reparations and so forth, with really good ideas for workshops. UJEC in the recent era has never figured out how to reach out to congregations directly. So I think we need to find a way to do that. I don't know where the association is now on giving us contact information, but if we're going to put together curricula, we need to get it to congregations, and preferably to the best person in the congregation who cares about that. So I just want to put that out, because everything that's been mentioned is not getting there right now. If people know about the webinars, they come, that's great. But if they're not on the list individually, it's not working to get many congregations knowing what we're doing.
Well, our mailing list is about 1325. I don't know how many of those are congregational people, in the administration or in the offices. So we need to do better on social media and get the word out there. And
Yeah.
Well, I'm talking about something that's going officially to congregations.
I
don't
understand
even
what you're
know.
saying, but I'll tell you from my experience, I don't know what Central Unitarian gets officially, but I never see any of it.
Yeah. Well, it's an institutional problem.
Yep. And they've shut off discussion.uua.org immediately after GA because I don't know, they don't think we can handle unmoderated conversations like, Facebook, but
And is there a newsletter? I never see it anymore.
we have a quarterly newsletter.
Not ours. Does
oh.
the UUA have one? Is there a
GA
communication
They put
vehicle?
out a GA email for a couple of months before GA every week. I don't know what else. Yeah. Jay, good idea. Prepackaged worship services.
I have an idea
Yeah.
to what what Brian says, well, could there be more things like how did he find us? There was this one workshop he went to where we were mentioned.
Right.
I think we need to look, are there UUA workshops that exist that we could participate in? Are there regional workshops that exist that we could participate in? Are there state network workshops that we could have some kind of role in? Or if they're not, could we help create such things and say, oh, we can contribute a webinar to your group or something like that?
Good thought.
Sally mentioned the movie series that they did. What we've done in our community is to co-op with the public library and show movies there. We've been doing a series on racial justice, and have a film series. And we've had about 30 UUs at this event out of maybe 100 people. It's co-sponsored by us, the library, and an African American church in town. So it has a good mix of people. Um, but co-oping with the library also gives your congregation visibility because the library promotes it and they have good mailing lists.
Yeah.
At any rate, I thought I'd mention that since you were talking about ways to get it, because 30 people out of a congregation of 270 is quite a few to come on a weeknight during dinner hour, 6 to 7:30 or so.
Yeah. And librarians work with digital rights and copyright issues all the time, so they
Right.
can handle that end of it. Yep.
So we don't have to do that part.
Yep.
Well, and how many people would come to our fellowship? I just don't think that many would come. There would be a barrier, but they might come to an event where we are and get to see that maybe this is a group they ought to be involved with.
Right. Yeah. Our film series was mostly for UUs, but then to have it in a public place, it will attract more people who don't know us. So it helps us expand that way. Yeah.
Are there more topics, more comments? Anybody else want to say something?
It's almost 2 hours. Are we ready to close it down? Well, that was our schedule, was 2 hours.
Right. We're right on time.
Yeah. And then I can go to the farm and play in the garden. I have a closing reading. Hope is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something is worth doing no matter how it turns out. And that's Vaclav Havel.
Nice.
And I don't have a candle snuffer, so I'm going to blow it out.
Well, thank
I
you
was
all.
lucky to have something that looked kind of like a chalice
Yes.
because I wasn't going to go buy one for a one-day event. Thank you very much, everybody. It was wonderful having you. A lot of people stayed through the end. We have a new person who has graciously agreed to be on our board. Gregory, is he? He was on just a minute ago. I guess he left. Okay.
What was that name again?
Gregory. I
Don't have his last name.
I'd
yet.
have to think a minute before I'll get his last name. Wouldn't take me very long. Stevens,
Right.
and he's
Where?
with the Interfaith Power and Light,
Hmm.
And Northern
and
California. He's in San Francisco.
Ah, okay.
right.
And they actually got a mention, by the way, in the CSA, I think that mentioned. So.
Uh-huh.
Do you know Gregory? Robert?
Yeah, I know somewhat, a little bit. Yeah,
Well, he knows who you are.
yeah, we worked a little bit on some other
Your
projects.
reputation preceded you.
Not surprised.
But he's from Tampa.
Yeah.
I'm Tampa, but that's not how I know him. We have some. That's just coincidence. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you
Thanks,
everybody
everyone.
for being here. We'll look for more fun in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See you all
Bye.
on August 14th.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Bye.
Bye.